What is going on, everybody? I go by the name of Curry, and I want to thank you guys for joining me here today on SneakerPhetish. Well, I guess we figured out where all that VIP Complex Con money went, developing this series known as SNEAKERHEADS. I got a lot to talk about today, but really I just want to break down what I personally didn't like about the show, who it may be geared towards, and what I think shows like this mean for the future of the sneaker culture. We got a couple of things to talk about, so let's just dive straight into it. If you don't know what it is, SNEAKERHEADS is a new show that just premiered on Netflix on September 25th. It's produced by Complex Networks. It was directed by Dave Meyers. So first of all, shout out to Dave Meyers. If you don't know who Dave Meyers is, he directed a lot of music videos that you love. The Block is Hot by Lil Wayne, Back That Thing Up by Juvenile. The most recent ones that you guys may be a little more familiar with, he directed Highest in the Room, the Travis Scott joint, and he also directed Laugh Now, Cry Later, the Drake joint with Lil Durk. So that's Dave Meyers. Now the show was developed by a guy named Jay Longino. If you don't know who Jay Longino is, he was involved with the Uncle Drew project. It did pretty well, the Kyrie Irving movie. He's from Atlanta, and this show was actually inspired by a real situation that happened to him. He used to be what was known as a gopher for the Atlanta Hawks back in the day, and one day he gathered up enough courage to basically ask Michael Jordan for a pair of his sneakers, and they were, of course, a pair of white cement Air Jordan 4s, 1989 edition. Mike gave him the sneakers, so he had a pair of game-worn Air Jordan 4 white cements. Apparently his mother sold them, if I'm not mistaken, and that was always something that kind of resonated within him later on, so he developed this show kind of loosely based on his own experience. Before I really get into the plot of the show, let's run through the characters, but while we run through the actual actors and the characters that they play, I'm going to point out a couple of things that I did or didn't like about the characters that they played. Starting off with the main character, goes by the name of Devin in the show. His real name is Alan Maldonado. Now, you may recognize him from Blackish, you may recognize him from The Last OG, I don't know, or this might have been your first time really being introduced to him. So Devin is an ex-sneakerhead. He apparently used to be the freshest of the fresh back in the day, got married, had a couple of kids, and got rid of his entire collection and went on to just wear Toms every day. Like he had forgotten everything that he ever loved about sneakers, but somehow was still passionate about sneakers, that when he got introduced back into it, he just fell all the way back into it. If he's distanced himself that far away from sneakers where he's wearing Toms every day, which to me, I know plenty of people that aren't super big sneakerheads no more, but that don't mean that they still don't like kicks. Like, that was the thing that bothered me. Like, why does he have to be so lame at this point? But it is what it is. So his character basically is struggling with adjusting to this suburban life, going corporate, finding a job, things of that nature, wearing the dad clothes now, and then also being pulled back into the street, into the lure of the sneaker world. Now, the main person that's luring him back into the sneaker world is his best friend, or I guess ex-best friend, whatever it is, his long lost homeboy, Bobby. Now, Bobby is played by King Batch, or Andrew Batchelor is his real name. If you know Vine, you know King Batch. If you've seen Wildin' Out, you've probably seen King Batch. King Batch is one of the top tier internet social media born comedians of this generation. Unfortunately, because of the roles that King Batch continues to play, I feel like he's always going to be stuck on this hamster wheel of doing these B-level movies that kind of get this mixed reaction and this lukewarm praise. I wonder if anybody's ever going to take him seriously as an actor, because he keeps doing all this slapstick comedy all the time. But it is what it is. It's paying the bills and it's getting him a check, so I can't hate on it. Bobby reminds me of some people that I've known back in the day. He's an ex-Foot Locker employee. He probably got fired for finessing some sneakers out the back door and getting caught doing it. He's a little sloppy. He's a little aloof. He's real goofy, but he has these moments where he's serious about sneakers and about connecting the dots and making things happen. And sometimes in the story, he has enough guilt on him through Devin or through other people that he'll actually pull through and do something dope. But he's just a lot. He's all over the place. He's just a lot. Now, Janice Corchado, I hope I'm saying that word right. She comes in, and I don't really know much about her previous career. I don't know much about the work she's done, but she actually did a pretty good job. She plays Nori in the show, and Nori is basically the connect. Nori's the plug. So Nori works for somebody named Stevie Kicks. I'm giving out all spoilers on this one. So Stevie Kicks actually ends up being a pseudo name for Nori. It's actually her, but she feels like because she's a woman in sneakers and she's a woman trying to be a sneaker plug, she won't get the same kind of respect or connections unless she attaches herself to this elusive man that really is the kingpin in sneakers, when really it's just her the whole time. Nori's super connected. She knows a lot of celebrities, a ton of celebrity cameos in this thing, which to me, doing a ton of celebrity cameos can go either way. It feels a little bit cheesy. It felt like they were trying to keep people engaged in the show, but it is what it is. But she has a lot of celebrities that she knows she's connected to. And a couple times throughout the show, you'll see Swaggy P pull up and she'll give him a pair of shoes and he'll say thanks. And then, you know, whatever the case is, he got his check and he probably went on his way. Now, the reason why I don't like her character as much is because if you know people that really operate the way that Nori operates, she's very no nonsense in the beginning of the show. She tells people to go take a hike and all this other type stuff. She has such a soft heart for people. And I don't know about you guys, but the people that I've seen that operate the way that Nori operates in this show do not have a soft heart like that and do not just welcome people into their team like that to make runs on sneakers for them. I could be wrong, but you don't really see it happen that much. Speaking of people that come into the team, that brings me to the next cast member, Matthew Jostin. He plays a guy named Stewie. Now, he's basically a rich kid with some money that wants to get into the sneaker game. You've seen people like this before. They don't know a whole lot about sneakers for real, but they're willing to kind of learn as they go. So Nori finesses him. She charges him $50 an hour to shadow her, and there's a whole subplot between the two of them that we'll get into in a minute. Basically, Stewie is a real goofy dude. He's some comic relief, and he kind of goes along with them just kind of as their apprentice, just kind of this ragtag team of people who team up to find these sneakers. Now, there's other characters, but we'll get into the plot and I'll kind of run through those other characters as we go through the plot. But those are the main characters in the show. All right, so like I mentioned, Jay Longino, the guy that made the show, he is into the white cement Jordan 4s. So in the show, Devin actually finds out one day he's taking the kids to school, and apparently that same morning, they're doing a hyper strike release of the white cement Air Jordan 4s. They're Devin's grails. He has to have them. So basically, he goes down to this local store. He hasn't been in the sneaker game for a long time, but because he played basketball, he averaged a bunch of points. He went to prom in this shoe. They have a lot of nostalgic value, He has to have the shoe. So he goes down, he stands in line. While he's in line, Bobby pulls up on him, his old homeboy from back in the day. They try to finesse their way through the line, and they get into the store, and they come to find out the shoes are not there anymore. There's another reseller outside of Nori on the show. It's a guy named Cole. He's kind of a rival reseller. So now we've set up that we kind of have this rival against this team of guys here. So Cole is a guy who's got a lot of money. He looks like a lot of people that I've known back in the day, going around to different stores. He's got some connects. He apparently finesses the last pair of white cement Jordan 4s out the door without even standing in the line. So by the time Bobby and Devin get into the store, the shoe is swapped out in the shoe box and the shoe is gone. Now, the manager of the store actually happens to be an old flame of Devin's. It's a woman named Gia, something like that. I don't know. So basically, she says, hey, give me a call if there's anything I can do for you. I got you. Devin still wants his grails, but he's not trying to pay resale price for it, so he gets ready to go home. Bobby convinces him to go and check out a storage unit because there's enough shoes in this storage unit that they're actually going to make enough money where he can get his white cement 4s or do whatever else he wants to do in sneakers. So he starts trying to lure Devin back into this world, and it works. They go to the sneaker storage unit. They end up buying the storage unit for $5,000. Bobby lies to him, says that he has half the money. He ends up not having half the money. So Devin has to spend $5,000 of his own money on this storage unit. They get the storage unit. There's a ton of grails. There's a ton of really expensive sneakers in the unit. However, the unit only has either left shoes or right shoes only. I think it's right shoes only or something like that. There's only one shoe for each of the pairs. So there's like Grateful 3s and Nike Mags and all these other really, really expensive sneakers, but it's only one shoe. So apparently the person who owned the unit, his girlfriend burned the other shoe, and now they only have one shoe. Now, just like that, first of all, that's the first place where I was watching the show and I said, this is unrealistic. Because honestly, they probably could have sold that one shoe because those sneakers were like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 shoes. They probably could have sold the one shoe somewhere and probably still made enough money to get the $400 that Devin needed for the white cements, or even the $5,000 back from the storage unit as a whole. They honestly could have sold that collection, even if it was just one shoe each, and probably at least gotten their $5,000 back that they needed. But for whatever reason, they feel like the shoes are worthless, and apparently I guess they just throw all of those grails away, even though it's just one shoe. And to make the $5,000 back, Bobby then persuades Devin to get into another scheme to go and find this ultra rare sneaker called the Zeros. The Zeros apparently were a thing of legend, but apparently the perfect pair, who's in a couple of scenes in a couple of episodes, Kenny G, you guys may know the perfect pair from Oklahoma City, has a spot out in Vegas. He's a big dog, obviously. If you know the perfect pair, then you know his collection is vast. It's worth millions of dollars. It is what it is. So he puts up an old video on Complex, of all places, that he would trade his entire collection for a pair of the Zeros. So now the new scheme is, if we get a pair of the Zeros, we can get Kenny G's entire collection, and then we're going to be mega rich in sneakers. So they hunt down this pair of Zeros, and it takes them a bunch of different places. It takes them overseas to Tokyo. They have to track down all these clues, and just takes them on all these different rides and roller coasters and stuff, all these ups and downs, and Bobby and Devin become good friends. And there's also a couple of subplots in there as well while they're hunting down the Zeros. Now, the first subplot is that Nori, the plug I told you guys about, she's trying to hunt down a pair of sneakers that her late father actually used to have. He wrote his initials on the tag, and apparently the guy Stewie finds the sneaker, and they kind of have a little romantic moment. There's another subplot that Devin's marriage is actually on the rocks because his wife starts finding out the stuff that he's doing, and he's getting back into the sneaker game, and that's putting a strain on their marriage. And so she goes to confront Gia, the old flame, because she finds her business card in their house with a bunch of hearts written around it. She goes to confront her, and come to find out, they actually end up becoming friends because Gia takes her on a ride trying to find this elusive purse that's worth a lot of money, and she's basically equating them trying to track down the purse to what Devin is doing, trying to track down the shoes so that his wife appreciates it more. But at the end of the day, his wife is still like, hey, you're a grown man, you shouldn't be doing this, all that other type stuff. I'm not gonna break down like episode by episode the entire series, but I will say that there's a couple of scenes that really stick out that a lot of people are talking about. Number one, in order to find the Zeros, they have to collect clues along the way that guides them to where the Zeros are. So one of those clues is actually being held by this little kid, and they call him Hot Dog Daddy 1 or Hot Dog Daddy 2 or something like that. So I guess that's his screen name from like Nike Talk or something like that, right? So Bobby gets in touch with this kid, and the kid goes, hey, I'll give you the clue, but I need a pair of Oregon 4s. So in order to find the Oregon 4s, they actually end up going to Mark Wahlberg's house. Now, Mark Wahlberg, the sneakerhead, is being played by Mark Wahlberg, who's like the game show host and like the daytime television host. So even though it's still Mark Wahlberg, it's not the same Mark Wahlberg as the Mark Wahlberg that they're pretending that he is in the show. So that's a whole scene. They play tennis, and it's a whole situation. Michael Rappaport is in there. Paul Pierce is in there. It's not quite funny enough to laugh at, but it was enough to just say, huh, well, you know. There's also another part when the show starts going on until like the 5th and 6th episode that I thought this is where the show is just really starting to get ridiculous. So Bobby and Devin get held up by the police when they're overseas in Tokyo or Hong Kong or something trying to track down these sneakers. So they track down the shoes, but then they get caught up by the police. They get detained by the police. And apparently because of a connection that Bobby made with him on the plane on the way there, Jason Statham comes in and saves them and puts them on a plane back to the United States. The same Jason Statham that's like from the Transporter movies. Now, you never see Jason Statham anywhere. It's just his name is alluded to, just like Michael B. Jordan's name is alluded to in the show and some other people as well. But But the thing about Jason Statham is that they actually made Jason out to be a gay man. And I found that funny because if you know, there was actually a story a couple of years ago about Jason Statham using some anti-gay slurs on a set that he was doing some movies on or a movie on or something like that. So maybe they were playing into that because he had gotten in trouble for the anti-gay stuff a couple of years ago. They just made him out to be like super homosexual in this one. But it's like, okay, I guess, you know, it is what it is. But I don't know. I don't think it really connected with anybody like that for it to really have any real impact on the show like that for reals. But it was in there. Like I mentioned, the show has a lot of cameos in there. Jason Mark is in there because he cleans off the Zeros. Somebody spills some juice on it or something like that. John Buscemi is in there. He's one of the guys that holds some other clues. So Bobby does a favor for him in his sandwich shop, and he ends up giving Bobby some clues for the shoes. So if you know sneakers, if you've been around sneakers within maybe the last 5 years, and you'll probably recognize some of the people that are throughout the show. Basically, Complex just called up a bunch of friends of theirs and was like, hey, can you be in this show for us real quick? We'll give you some money. And I think they probably just jumped in and did it. Maybe they did it for a favor. I don't know. But clearly it was friends of Complex that were all throughout this thing. So here's how I feel about the show as a whole. To me, the show wasn't funny. And I don't know really how else to put it in a nice way. I feel like the director was good. I feel like the concept was different than what I expected it to be. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe I should have gone into this show literally not expecting anything at all. But to me, the comedy was just so over the top and slapstick. And then the references to the sneaker world were just so ridiculous that if you really are into sneakers, the stuff that they talk about and the things that they do just don't make any sense at all. This is truly a show for people that are not that deep into the sneaker world. But the thing that's disappointing is because it's marketed towards people that are really deep into the sneaker world. But then when you watch it, there's ridiculous things that happen. Like there's a scene where they try to take a pair of Red Octobers that they finessed off of a music video shoot to Flight Club. The guy doesn't want them. So he's like, okay, I'll give you $1,000 for them. And they take the money. And Devin takes the money. It's like, really $1,000 for some Red Octobers? Like that would never happen, right? Like there's another scene where the guy Stewie, he buys some Concord 11s off of Devin for $600. Who in their right mind would buy a pair of Concords for $600? I mean, I get that it may speak to the kids that are young and dumb with a bunch of money in their pocket, but nobody in their right mind would ever pay $600 for a sneaker like that. It just doesn't make sense. And I think that's how I felt a lot of times when I was watching the show. Like I was yelling at the screen, like that would never happen in the sneaker world. Like this would never happen. Like previously I told you about Nori just inviting these guys in. Like usually when you have people that are really making big moves like that, they're not looking for anybody new to come into their team. They don't know if they can trust them. They don't know if they can trust them with money. And it's like, now you have this connect. She's basically the Benjamin Kicks of this sneaker world on this show, just inviting people in like, oh yeah, no problem. Just come on and work for me here. Just no problem at all. And to me, that's completely unrealistic of how that part of the sneaker world works. On top of that, it felt like the show was a little bit detached from what's really going on in sneakers right now because there was one major topic that they never even touched on: bots. Now, I understand that this was a grail and it's not something that was really available online, but it's like, if you're around people and making all these flips and deals and stuff like that, and you're trying to track down this sneaker, I just don't understand why they didn't use more digital means to track down the shoe besides using an iPad with some pictures on it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So in that instance, it just seemed a little unbelievable. And the big thing for me, honestly, was how serious some portions of the show were and how funny and slapstick and ridiculous other pieces of the show were. Like the two never quite seemed to melt together. It felt so forced, them trying to put these two things together. Like on the side with Devin and his wife, there were some parts that were so serious. Like you almost felt like you were watching a drama, the way that they were acting it out. Like they were taking the acting very seriously. So you watch a scene where Devin and his wife are having a very serious, very heavy moment. And then King Batch would come bopping in like, hey man, what's up? What's going on, man? Let's find these shoes. And it's like, okay, well that moment's lost now. Like that's gone. So I guess that's one thing I didn't really like, was how much you had to snap back into the slapstick comedy so fast. It didn't seem very well written to me. On top of that, one thing I also didn't like about it is that on the surface, it seemed like a really funny, friendly, easy watch. It was only about 20 minutes long per episode. There's 6 episodes, and it seems like it was really catering to the young kids out here. But then every other word is the F word in the show. Like there's so much cursing in the show. It's ridiculous. I've never heard that much cursing within a 20-minute period than watching the Sneakerheads show. And it made me think, okay, well, there's so much cursing in the show. Clearly it's intended for a mature audience, but the mature audience that you're going after because of all of this cursing, they're really the OG sneakerheads that are going to watch this show, and they're going to realize it's so ridiculous that they don't even want to watch it. So all in all, and this is the part that I really want to convey to Complex, especially since this was just season 1, if they want to develop a season 2, which I guess they're going to do, you need to really understand who you're actually marketing this show to. Now, I have my idea that I'll get to in a second, but I think overall, that's the thing that really bothered me the most with this show, is that it felt like they didn't know who the show was for. They just slapped a bunch of shoes and a bunch of buzzwords in there from the sneaker world and a bunch of loose concepts about things that may or may not really go down in the sneaker world these days, and they called it a show. But who was the show for? Who was the audience that you were trying to pander to? Were you trying to pander to the older sneakerheads by the mature language and the heavier subplots within the show? Or were you trying to market to the young hype beasts with all the flashy sneakers and the money and the funny stuff? Like, who was it? Who was this for? Because those two audiences, I don't know if you've been under a rock for the last few years, they don't mesh very well with one another. They don't gel very well with one another. This show felt like exactly what people debate about when it comes to OGs who appreciate nostalgia and sneaker history and stuff like that, and the young kids that are just trying to flip sneakers for as much money as they can possibly get. And just like how in real life, those two audiences don't go well together, those two plots just didn't seem to mesh very well with me at all. So that made me realize who I think this show really is for. Personally, I think that this show is for the exact group of people that Complex is trying to pander to in order to put more money in Complex's pocket. Complex, in my opinion, really doesn't care a ton about the culture as it is, or the community as it is, or I'll take that back. Maybe Complex cares more about the culture as it is in 2020 more than the community. I remember my friend Jezreel Allen Lord said something very profound about there's a stark difference between the sneaker culture these days and the sneaker community these days. And the sneaker community these days tends to be the older people that really appreciate their sneakers and appreciate this thing, the story, the history, all the artists that are making these amazing shoes. And the sneaker culture these days seems to be the thing that's been perverted into Off-White, Travis Scott, StockX, GOAT, money, resale, holder sell, all this other type of stuff. It seems to really be there at this point. And I think that that is who Complex really wanted to watch this show and who they were really marketing this show to. But the problem is that 15, 16, 14-year-old group of kids that are probably cursing up a storm all the time, just like they did on the show, they don't care about any of the heavy stuff. They don't care about the fact that Devin's marriage was in trouble. And they don't care about that. All they wanted to see was some fly sneakers that's worth a whole lot of money. That's it. So Complex, for season 2, you gotta choose a side. You gotta choose a side that you're gonna lean all the way in on, because this thing was so lukewarm between those two opposites that it just felt really awkward and honestly kind of difficult to watch. Like, by the time I got to episode 5 and then episode 6, I literally felt myself choking down the episodes just to get through them, just so I can be able to say I watched the whole thing. But man, it was a hard watch. It's like a stoner comedy, but for sneakers, but that also has some heavy subplots in it as well. It doesn't make sense. So my personal opinion, should you watch Sneakerheads on Netflix? Sure, go for it. But I didn't laugh much. If you laugh, if you think it's funny, chances are you're the type of person that's not super heavily inundated into sneakers. I will tell you guys this. The people that I talked to that seem to enjoy this show the most were people that really are not into sneakers. They passively like sneakers. They look at a shoe and they're like, oh, that's cool, but I would never pay $200 for those. Those types of people were like, yeah, I took it for what it was worth. It was a funny little show about sneakers and, you know, there were some jokes and it was what it was. But people that are hardcore into shoes like that I thought this show was kind of pandering to, because they use a lot of terminology like hyperstrike and grails and all this other type stuff. I thought that's who they were catering to. We hated it. We did not like the show at all. Like, the show is trash as far as I'm concerned, because again, it felt way too juvenile for a lot of the OGs that appreciated the heaviness of some aspects of it, but didn't like all of the little kid stuff of the other parts of it. It didn't know who it was. This show has a real identity crisis right now. It doesn't know who it wants to be. And Complex, if you guys want this thing to be a success for real, you need to decide what this show is and who this show is for, and lean completely into that. That's my advice. Listen, I'm no stranger to the Grail hunt. I waited 20 years. Y'all know I'm gonna bring these shoes out whenever I can bring them out. I waited 20 years to get my hands on this Air Jordan 14 OGs. Very rare, very, very rare. This sneaker cost me a lot of money too. So I get trying to track down your grail. I get the feeling that you get when you track down your grails. But at the same time, the people that really appreciate these stories like this, we honestly resonate a lot more with documentaries like Just for Kicks and even the Sneakerheads documentary that came out a few years ago. Even though this show wasn't a feature film, but there was even a movie that came out that was called Kicks. That was actually kind of a coming of age movie about a kid that got jumped for his Air Jordan 1s and he went back to go find the people that did it. That movie was really good, but it was a serious tone throughout the movie. It had a little comedy in it, but otherwise it was a serious tone throughout. It was consistent. And I think that's the thing that I didn't like about this show is that there's no consistency in either direction. It just tried to be everything for everybody. And in the world of sneakers, you should already know by now, you can't be everything for everybody. You got to pick a side. So like I said, since this is a complex production, I'm guessing that they're going to lean more over to the young reseller, hype beast, holder sell, resale value, all that culture. They're gonna lean into all of that over there, which is fine. There's a demographic for that. And honestly, that's probably the majority of the people that are even watching sneaker YouTube right now. So I get it. It's profitable. It's a cash cow. If that's who you're trying to make this show for, lean completely into that. But as you lean completely into that, you gotta keep up with what these kids these days are doing. So here's what I hope to see in season 2, if I choose to watch season 2 of Sneakerheads. You're gonna have to put more people in there that the younger kids are connecting with these days. People like JC Lopez. You're gonna have to put people like Better Boy Nova in there and talk about botting. You're gonna have to talk about botting because botting is huge. Jay Longino, the film's director, the creator, he said he didn't want to put anything about botting in there because he wanted it to be true to the nostalgia of what sneakers used to be back in the day. But my guy, you're making this with Complex. You're not going to be able to do that. You got to put something in there that resonates with the kids these days. So he's going to have to switch up the way that he's been doing some of these things with this show. He has to. All in all, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give Sneakers about a 3 out of 10. The acting is okay in most instances. The directing is pretty dope. The story is weak. The sneakers are nice. And that's basically it. The storyline tends to drag in the middle. It felt kind of rushed towards the end. It felt like they were just slapping together whatever they could just to get it done. And honestly, I don't like watching stuff like that. But again, that's just one man's opinion. I really want to hear from you guys on this one. Sound off down in the comments below. Let me know, first of all, did you watch Sneakerheads on Netflix? Tell me what you thought of it. Did you enjoy it? Did you find it funny? Or do you share my sentiments about the way that this kind of seemed to have this identity crisis and didn't really know what it wanted to be or who it wanted to be that thing for? I'm really interested to hear what you guys thought about the series. Sound off down below. Let me know. Of course, right down in the comments, make sure that you click on that subscribe button so we can welcome you into the Sneaker Fetish family to make sure you don't miss out on any more movie reviews or heat like my grails that come through, because I guarantee you I got a lot more heat on the way. As always, I want to thank you guys for joining me here today on Sneaker Fetish. I go by the name of Kari, and until next time, I'm out.